Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof, for the 27th of June 2025. I've got my usual large amounts of content to get out today. I can't do any tonight. I'm going to see 28 Years Later. Oh, that's going to be exciting. Good old Danny Boyle and the reprise of that fantastic set of films. Right, okay, that's relevant. What do we have in terms of the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before? We have a load of caveats, and they do apply yet again, as they do every day, to these figures. You can see them linked in the description below. Right, 970 personnel lost, under 1,000, but still a significant number, right? 1 tank, 4 AFVs, low numbers there, 13 artillery systems, actually below the daily average, and that's unusual for that category. 89 vehicles and fuel tanks below 100, which seems crazy to say that's not a lot, but that's kind of where we're at. So those are low numbers, comparatively speaking. What could explain that? Could it be that there is not a lot of activity, comparatively speaking, going on the front lines? Well, maybe it could be the weather. I don't think so. But I don't know for sure. Yeah, just slightly lower numbers than we have seen over the recent weeks and months. Right, another prisoner exchange has taken place. President Zelensky announced returning home today are defenders from the Armed Forces, National Guard and Border Guard Service. Most had been in captivity since 2022. The oldest is 62, youngest 24 there, and they returned to joyous celebrations. Really interesting actually to see a bit of a comparison. Yeah, here I just want to whenever I see the Ukrainian prisoners being released, the pictures are so joyous, and there's such a happiness that you can't really see there, but so many family members and all sorts. And whenever I see Russian prisoners released, it always looks a bit less impressive. And they're just standing around. Yeah, okay, they're here. They're shouting. They're probably jingoistic stuff or whatever. But I don't know. I just get a sense that there's so much more joy. And in fact, we're going to see at the end of this video something that I found pretty emotional. When a soldier met another soldier, both had been in captivity together. One had been previously released and came to this exchange to meet some of these soldiers, and then met someone that he was in prison with, and it's incredibly emotional. Anyway. Right, moving on. Russian servicemen fighting near Prosk are reporting mass poisoning, possible sabotage near the settlement of Novohezhizadvetivka or something like that. They believe that the water being sent to the front positions could have been poisoned. This isn't for the first time. This happened a number of times closer to the beginning of the war, when a lot of the southern areas like Zaporizhia and Hersan were taken over relatively quickly by the Russians. And they were getting sort of local supplies, and local Ukrainians ended up trying to sort of poison the water supply and whatnot, or not the water supply, bottles of water and the like. So this isn't for the first time, but it appears that there has been another incident of poisoning whereby Russians have ended up in these clinics here, or in this clinic. There's also the claim that a Chinese reporter has been injured in Kursk region, according to Russia. They claim he was filming a civilian project when the drone hit. Of course, he filmed civilian projects with army helmets and whatnot on. But anyway, yeah, so that, I don't know if that's going to cause any particular issues. Right, a video has come out of the drone units, the Ghost drone unit, special unit, the GUR, destroying S-400 Triumph equipment. This is the best air defense system, really, that the Russians have. And there is a lot of expensive kit being taken out here. I don't know the time of this, as in when it took place, but obviously one assumes fairly recently. I've not seen this footage previously. Quite often, yeah, it's around the Crimean area. So if you look at the value of this stuff getting taken out, this is high value kit, and quite a bit of it. So there, that hits in. You don't know what the overall damage is or how big these drones are, but they look a bit more significant than your general FPV drones. These are drones, I assume, that have come off the back of a Magura V5 unmanned sea vehicle. So, are they just regular FPV drones? I don't know. As they approach, you get the sense that they're slightly larger drones. I mean, I'm saying they come off the back of a V5 only because you see a bit of water right at the beginning here, which gives you an indication they've come from the sea, right? But yeah, there. But otherwise, I don't know. Just looks like, you know, the way that they bank like that makes me think they're fixed wings rather than quadcopters or something. But I'm no expert. There's just a lot of equipment here. In fact, it's listed here by Max 25. They hit 2 multifunctional 92 N2E control radars, 2 91 N6E detection radars, and a launcher of an S-400 complex. 5 bits of kit that, and bear in mind the launchers can't really do anything without these other bits. So launchers are contingent upon the radars and control centers, I guess. So that's really, really good video there. It suggests a lot of kit damaged. This is fascinating. I showed this on my live stream last night with Greg Terry. These are the Azov Special Forces doing some fishing, taking out Russian drones here. Now, I showed you a video full of nets being thrown onto drones and taking out drones in that way, which seems to be really effective. This is even simpler. Dropping some kind of line, just like a fishing line, with a bit of a weight onto the propellers of these drones, getting caught in the propellers, and that's the end of the drone. And there's lots of them being taken out in this way. Really effective. Of course, you know, the Ukrainians can do this, Russians can do this really easily. But it's you can see a lot of drones are getting taken out from a very simple method there. There's another 30 seconds of that afterwards. So an awful lot of drones going by the wayside. What else do we have? So it seems like the Switchblade 600 is still being pretty effective. There are I've seen more and more of these Switchblade videos recently to suggest that the Ukrainians are using them effectively. They are American produced drones. They had the Switchblade 300s as well initially, but they are only like a hand grenade really as a piece of ordnance, and they don't really do all that much damage. But the 600s can take out armor, and I don't know whether there were issues with them initially in terms of, I don't know, control, effectiveness, but they were heralded as being, whoa, these are American drones, you know, before the Ukrainians had developed their drone warfare. So right at the beginning of the war, the Americans gave them their top bit of kit here, the Switchblades, and they were like, oh yeah, awesome, okay, then they kind of disappeared, and maybe they weren't effective for whatever reason. And then they've adapted them, made them, you know, getting feedback from the front line and whatever, made them more effective. And now they're being used, I think, a lot more. And here you can see, I don't know exactly what bit of kit that was, but it's taken one for the team, and then another Switchblade use at the end there. So certainly being used more effectively there, it seems. Right, what else do we have? Ukrainian aircraft struck the positions of Russian drone operators in Soledar. Like I keep saying, these are your top value targets to be hit, so that's continuing to happen. In fact, guided glide bombs are being used, as I keep saying, far more frequently in the moment by the Ukrainians. And of course, I reported yesterday that they may well have used their own newly developed guided glide bombs with their own UPMK guidance kits at 25,000 a pop. They're arguably cheaper than many of the other alternatives. Okay, Ukraine just brought back its Bayraktar TB2 drone. So I showed you the other day a video of a boat, a naval, I think Russian kind of naval speedboat thing with troops on being hit by a munition and spotted, and it did look like TB2 footage. Lo and behold, it was a TB2, I think, by all accounts. And yeah, this again possibly a similar history to what I was just talking about, had great success at the beginning of, well, even more so, great success at the beginning of the war. Then the Russians adapted to the TB2s and you started seeing them far, far less. In fact, not at all. They kind of went silent for a couple of years. And occasionally you'd see some footage of them being used as reconnaissance drones, particularly over the Black Sea. So a couple of strikes, sort of HIMARS strikes, I think were hit into one of the sandbars just by the Kimburn Peninsula, but not the Kimburn Peninsula. It's the Tendriska Spit, I think, further to the southeast. There were some significant strikes that seemed to be targeted by the TB2 drones, and I've seen a number of incidences where they've been used over the Black Sea. And indeed, that naval speedboat that was hit was indeed over the Black Sea, one assumes. So it could be that that's where they're finding their mark. But Euromaidan Press reports that they've just brought back the TB2 drone. So they've also noticed that it's back in action. So TB2s were big, fat, and hard to replace targets for Russian air defenses. Smaller, better, and cheaper drones, many of them made in Ukraine, soon displaced the survivors of the approximately 60 TB2s Ukraine had received from Turkey. That some TB2s are back in action over Dnipro so that boat might be on Dnipro, speaks to the insatiable demand for drones as Russia's wider war grinds into its 40th month, but it also hints at gaps in Russia's air defenses over the southern front. So piecing this together, we have just seen an S-400 system being taken out over Crimea area, probably Crimea, but it could be Hersan, southern part, the coastal area between Dnipro River and Crimea. It could be there, which means that you take out those S-400s and then suddenly you're able to use these TB2 drones more freely. TB2s were vulnerable 3 years ago. They're even more vulnerable now, but only when the Russians can deploy their best air defenses. The Ukrainians have been degrading those air defenses in part by targeting the radars and launchers with the same small drones that largely replace the TB2s in Ukrainian service. A new generation of drones has afforded the previous generation of drones another opportunity to fight for Ukraine. I think that's really well put there. Anyway, I don't think we need to look into too much more of that. Although, let's see what it has to say here. Sign of things to come. The Russians retreated through the autumn of 2022, consolidated their hold on Ukraine's easternmost and southernmost oblasts while rebuffing the Ukrainian 2023 offensive in the south, and then counterattacked in 2024. But the pace of Russian advances dramatically slowed in 24 as it turned into 2025 and the wider war entered its fourth year. Ukraine's drones are the main reason why, but the TB2s no longer lead the aerial assault. The Russians shot down 26 of the Turkish-made drones in 2022 and 2023. Some of the survivors were still active as late as the autumn of 2023, but they soon faded from view as well. Ukraine's fast-growing defense industry replaced a few dozen multi-million-dollar TB2s with literally millions of tiny first-person view drones, each weighing just a few kilograms and costing a few $100s, controlled via radio or fiber optic cable by the headset-wearing operator who sees what the drone sees. The warhead-clutching FPVs have utterly devastated the Russian war machine. So the TB2s aren't strictly necessary given the abundance of more affordable alternatives. That TB2s are venturing back into what was once heavily contested airspace points to the depletion of Russian air defenses across swathes of southern Ukraine. Drones, some launched by Ukraine's fleets of unmanned surface vehicles, have been relentlessly hunting Russian radars, surface-to-air missile batteries and air defense vehicles in Crimea this year, recently striking S-300 and S-400 sand batteries and Buk and Tor vehicles, as well as several radars and jammers, as we've just seen. The TB2s have rejoined the fight because they can and because they still pack a punch, even as newer drones have left them far behind. So the good thing about the TB2s is they can be equipped with missiles on board that can do arguably better damage or can do different things to what FPV drones with RPGs and whatnot can do. Okay, so what do we have? Actually, there was something else I wanted to show you. It's this one. So videos from invaders reveal Ukraine has hit a Russian camp on the left bank of Hersan region. It's near Nova Mayachka, 10 kilometers south of Krinky, the riverbank village. The pinpoint strike burned everything except the dining room, according to their own admission. Many occupiers were likely killed. Not sure if this is the same place, but a Russian selfie soldier describes a devastating hit on their positions. All the equipment in the dugouts has been destroyed, he says, by 2 Baba Yaga drones. Just an odd bulletproof vest remains, yet he claims all the guys are alive. That doesn't look like the massive fire that you saw above here. So it could well be that there are 2 separate instances going on there. But Baba Yagas in the second case don't know what was responsible for the first hit of a Russian camp there. In Hersan. So Ukrainians doing their job. Now, speaking of Hersan, Russian forces themselves carried out an airstrike on a residential area in Hersan district. 1 person was killed and another injured as a result of bombing yesterday. Residential neighborhoods in the city of Hersan were also hit. A 2-story residential building and an outbuilding were partially destroyed. And those Russians really now very overtly explicitly targeting civilian infrastructure in Hersan. It is terrorism. It is war crime. Now, I've talked to you many times about female units and having to use their personnel as effectively as possible, or their human resources, should we say, in Ukraine. So can they get older people who have retired, or less physically able people, maybe amputees or people with prosthetics, or women, not putting all of these people in the same pot, like ability-wise. There are, of course, women who can operate on the front line, but they may be primary caregivers for children and might still need to be near their children. And so can they do a day job, put the kid into nursery? You know, literally, you've got to think of things like this. Put the kid into nursery by day, and then in the daytime, and then go out or get their parents to look after them at nighttime or whatever it is, and then go out and shoot down Shahids in a mobile air defense team. Well, here we've got the Kharkiv Brigade saying it hopes to change the situation by updating internal practices to better integrate women into units, whether they be snipers or drone pilots or, you know, infantrymen or women. It's about having to fill the boots, the many pairs of boots that they have to fill with whoever they can in order to do what they need to do. And sometimes they need to think creatively, and sometimes it's just getting over perceived barriers. And in this case, you know, having women operate in different roles. Okay, I showed you a video yesterday of these guys announcing that they were very grateful for a new motorbike. And thank you for fundraising for it. And then they clapped the guy on the back to show the audience this amazing motorbike, and then he went and drove into a hedge, and it was hilarious. I laughed anyway. Here we've got another friendly fire incident with motorbikes. Oh dear. Yeah. Oh well, there you go. Health and safety first, guys. Health and safety first. Okay, let's move on to distant strikes. So massive set of drones sent into Ukraine last night. However, the interception rate was insanely good. It was 99%. It's a record for this many drones, I think. I've literally just received the numbers behind the attack, says Tim White. Russia launched 371 items. 8 missiles were fired. All 6 Caliber cruise missiles were shot down, but both Kinzhal hypersonic Dagger missiles got past air defense. However, of the 363 drones, all but 4 were stopped. This is insane. A record 99%. 211 were shot down, 148 by electronic warfare. I'm wondering whether they were just sending more of them further back into Ukraine rather than at frontline towns like Druzhkivka and Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, where they have much less chance of Ukrainians of shooting them down. The Ukrainians are using interceptor drones more freely. In fact, let's have a look. So, okay, we've got 0 out of the 2 Kinzhals, but 359 out of 363 drones being intercepted is absolutely incredible. Here we go. Yeah. So, oh no, it's not that one. Where do I have it? I have some footage here. No, it's not. Yes, here it is. So this is what we want to look at. Okay. This, as far as I'm aware, this is the first footage, well, certainly that I've seen, of an interceptor drone taking out a Shahid drone here.
За ней сразу FPV-шка, глянь, вот прям за ней сразу, блядь. Бам!
он въебал.
Сбил, ля.
А ну, наш был?
Да, наш же FPV-шка сбил.
You can't really see too
За
much,
ней сразу FPV-шка, глянь.
but there's a little explosion there. Now, if they are scaling up production of interceptor drones, and it looks like that, I've seen plenty of footage and images of new interceptor drones that have been designed for exactly that purpose. If they are suddenly getting to the point where they can produce hundreds of those, and if they can start filtering them out, because obviously there's one thing producing them, there's another thing knowing where to use them and where are the most common trajectories for these routes for these Shahid drones and so on and so forth. But I'm also wondering whether, if you could get them to places like Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, can you stop some of those frontline places getting hit? So I think these new interceptor drones are going to be very important. I hope they are anyway. I hope they're going to be super successful. But it could be why you've suddenly got an incredible interception rate going on there, or it could be just, the regular things did their job, air defenses and electronic warfare, and the Ukrainians or the Russians had decided just to send their drones at the existing heavily defended areas like Kiev. Okay, there's been another ballistic missile attack this morning at Dnipropetrovsk. Unfortunately, it suffered heavily the other day where that train was hit. You had ballistics hitting Dnipropetrovsk itself, the city, but also a place called Samar. Now Samar has been hit again. So 2 missiles are fired, and it looks like both went to Samar, the town just outside Dnipro city. 2 explosions confirmed there. It comes just days after previous ballistic attack in the area. This morning, rescuers said people are still missing from the earlier attack the other day. Remember, during the NATO summit, there was the strike. Unfortunately, the train was hit with 500 people on the train. It led to now, I think it's 21 people have been confirmed killed and over 300 injured, many from that train, but also kindergartens and schools were also struck, like multiple schools and kindergartens. Just, horrific stuff. 340 injuries there, and more coming from Dnipropetrovsk. Bad news, says Tim White, from the ballistic attack. 3 people have already died there. Another 14 known to be injured so far. So I don't know what was targeted there, but it's a real shame. Okay, the barrages targeting Ukraine's capital have been heavier and longer than at almost any point since the beginning of the war, killing at least 40 people this month. A few more nights like this, and I feel people are going to start leaving Kyiv again, says someone there, which is exactly what you don't want. Maybe interception rates like last night are what we need to see. But of course, what goes up must come down. So even with the interceptions being spot on, you're still going to have debris falling in urban areas. The best thing that Ukraine can do is destroy the manufacturing facilities of the Shahids. It is absolutely target number 1, in my opinion. Right. Then we see what Ukraine was able to achieve yesterday. I don't know that there's all that much evidence of destruction or large-scale drone activity last night. Bryansk was hit in the socials yesterday afternoon. This is Bryansk. There are yet unconfirmed reports of a rocket hitting the city's Fominsky district there. Another view of fire in Bryansk yesterday evening, and then more smoky sights from Bryansk. The idea was that tonight strike drones operated by Ukraine's military intelligence, HUR or GUR, depending on how it's transcribed, hit missile fuel and fuel storage facilities belonging to Russia's 1061st Logistics Center in Bryansk. So that was what was hit there, by all accounts, taking out some fuel depots and whatnot. So, more videos coming out from Bryansk there. Then, and I shared this with you last night in the live stream, first recorded evidence, as far as I'm aware, of the new Peklo drone being used. It took out supposedly a river crossing on the Idar River and damaged a pumping station. That's what's left of it, and that apparently shows it's Peklo. Peklo means hell in Ukrainian, hell in English. This is one of these missile drones that has been scaled up, so we believe, but we haven't really seen evidence of its usage. There's a lot of talk of this. But yeah, good to see that there is evidence of its existence there. Yesterday, a strike was carried out on the outskirts of occupied Luhansk. Among the weapons used was the missile drone Peklo. It has a range of 700 kilometers and a speed of 700 kilometers per hour. Wow. So it can get that 700 kilometers in 1 hour. Ukraine is was apparently also carrying out yesterday, although I've not seen any other evidence of this. This was 10:30 last night UK time, so 12:30 Kiev time in the morning. Ukraine is apparently carrying out a saturation strike on the Crimean bridge. Drones were previously coming from the northwest and the west. Now they are being recorded coming from the north over the Azov Sea. That said, Kursk bridge often gets closed during attacks nearby, but I've not heard anything about that from this morning. So, yeah, take it all with a pinch of salt. Maybe it was an attack on the Kursk bridge and nothing got through. There are obviously going to be some of the best air defences around the Kursk bridge. We know that there are Pantsers placed on them, Panzer S1s and whatnot. This was meant to be before. This is the Peklo drone there. The Russians filmed the first confirmed evidence of, that Ukraine has been deploying their Peklo drone, the cruise missile drone, with a range of 700 kilometers. Here it says a speed of about 600 kilometers per hour. So there or thereabouts. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces now. And we're going to start with North Korea. So Russia and North Korea are apparently preparing a joint attack against Ukraine, according to South Korean lawmakers. North Korea may deploy additional troops on Russia's side in the war against Ukraine as early as July or August, they said. That is very concerning, and it would be nice, I'll tell you, if South Korea could help out a little bit more explicitly with Ukraine. Anyway, Reuters is reporting North Korea may send more troops to Russia in July or August for Ukraine's the war against Ukraine. South Korea's National Intelligence Service told lawmakers that they assess that Russia may launch a new offensive in the next 2 months, supported by additional troops from North Korea. I get frustrated with people who dismiss the North Koreans. Actually, I had a little bit of I remember speaking to Jake Bro about this on one of the videos where he came on, and this is right at the beginning where North Korea were sending troops to Ukraine, and I was like, he was quite dismissive, saying there'll be cannon fodder. I was like, no, this is a problem. They may start being cannon fodder. They ended up being not very good, but they learned quickly, and they are people with guns running at you, and you have to take them out. And if you don't take them out, they will take you out. This takes troops away from Ukrainian troops are needed, or drones are needed, resources are needed to deal with these North Koreans, and they will attrit Ukrainians. And if you're talking about 14,000 North Koreans previously, and then maybe another 6,000 was talked about the other day, now maybe even more, this could be another set of ones on top of the 6,000 that sappers and reconstruction workers, but many people think are soldiers. You've got 25,000 North Koreans going to the Shahid factory to build the Shahid drones in Yellowburg, and then going back to North Korea to take what they've learned and you apply it to manufacturing in North Korea, where they'll export them to Russia. All of this is prolonging the war. North Koreans are a big problem. They've learned how to be better soldiers, and no doubt, North Koreans will cause the death of Ukrainians. The more North Koreans that are provided, the more Ukrainians will die. It's just, it's another challenge for the Ukrainians. It's something else they have to overcome. And Western nations don't seem to be doing anything about it, predominantly, I think, because they've been applied, the North Koreans, to the Kursk Oblast inside Russia. Now, if they are sent into Ukraine, it's going to be interesting to see how the international community and allies react. Now, Russia may launch a large-scale offensive on Ukraine with the support of North Korea in the summer, so South Korean intelligence. Russia will probably send another 6,000 North Korean soldiers. They're already being recruited, says Max 25. Again, we'll have to see what numbers they end up providing. Now, a large transfer of equipment and ammunition through Mariupol is being recorded. Russia will soon storm in the Zaporizhia direction, according to Andriy Shchenko, who is the exiled, I think, mayor of Mariupol. Rostov, Novoazovsk, Mariupol, Polohi, Berdyansk direction. 7 platforms with armoured vehicles, over 40 trucks with manpower and ammunition. Crimea, Hersan, Mariupol, Novoazovsk, Taganrog, Rostov-Sumy, a column of over 20 trucks with manpower, 5 tractors with armoured vehicles, the BMP and BMD class. Intensified assault attempts are expected in Hyliopole and Orikhiv districts. So I don't know if we've got a map that can give you... No, it's just off there. So, well, no, actually, that's fine. So we are talking essentially here, and maybe even over here as well. So Hyliopole, Polahi, and Orikhiv. So those kind of areas, and there are massings. Mariupol is there on the Sea of Azov, Taganrog, Rostov-on-Don. So I don't know if that's a truly worrying number of troops and equipment, but they are certainly appearing to have intentions on attacking Zaporizhia. Russian forces are expected to intensify their offensive in the Zaporizhia direction, says no reports, in the coming days, according to the advisor Andriy Shenko. 7 train platforms with armour, including tanks and over 40 trucks with troops and ammo, have been redeployed. Additional convoys have also been spotted. I was talking yesterday about trucks with troops being spotted going up to Sumy, possibly from Crimea, but it could be that those Crimean troops are actually going to Zaporizhia to be deployed. Right, Russian forces have already occupied the second of 4 lithium deposits in Ukraine, according to Le Figaro. This is what Greg Terry was talking about on the live stream last night near the village of Shevchenko, which is, I presume, the one to the south of Prosk. It's one of the most promising deposits in our country and is located in the village of Shevchenko. In addition to lithium, the deposits also contain many other rare metals. I don't think that's Shevchenko. That's been sort of off and on taken anyway. So I don't know if that's another Shevchenko in Donetsk. Almost certain that there are multiple Shevchenkos there, as there are multiple villages with the same names all over Ukraine, often very close to each other. That is a real shame. The Russians are inching forward right across the Donbass, and that these are very rich areas often for coal, for natural resources. Here we're talking about lithium and rare earth metals and whatnot, and exactly what Ukraine needs to remain sustainable throughout the time after the end of this war. Okay, so if you remember, up in Sudzha in Kursk, the Russians were attempting to attack the Ukrainians by going down a gas pipe and then coming out the other end and surprising them. But there were claims that maybe as many as 700 Russians died, or there were all sorts of different claims. What definitely happened is it was a disaster, right? And it was not only sort of hit with artillery and all sorts of munitions, and people died because of the actions of the Ukrainians, but people died as well because of suffocating and the gas. And indeed, the people who survived have now got serious health problems. It's weird. They've reconstructed a bit of pipe, and they're almost treating it with cultic adulation. It's just it's so weird. They've got a piece of pipe. I forget where it is. They've laid it out, and then people are going praying on it and all sorts of stuff. But actually, the whole thing was a disaster for the Russians. Anyway, Chris Owicki says doomed Russian troops who made a long trek through a gas pipeline to attack Ukrainian forces have been denied awards or any significant compensation for the lung damage and cancers they contracted. The news is being denounced as a betrayal. Russian forces carried out what they called Operation Stream in March 2025 to ambush Ukrainian forces holding the Kursk region town of Sudzha. Around 600 men were reported to have spent 6 days walking nearly 16 kilometers through a disused gas pipeline leading under the town. Although the pipeline was empty of gas, it still contained toxins and carcinogenic chemicals. An unknown but significant number of Russians died, overcome by the fumes within the pipeline. Those who survived emerged with permanent lung damage and cancerous tumours. Russian war blogger and journalist Anastasia Kashevarova reports that their soldiers have been given a token compensation of about $1,270 each for their damaged lungs and cancers, and have been denied awards for their actions. So on and so forth. Lots of kickback about that. The soldiers themselves are not happy, families are not happy, etc., etc. And in this case, the journalist is not happy about that. So there is that happening. Now, talking about hydrocarbons, Urals oil price now falls below $60 again, according to Reuters. The price of oil at Russian ports has dropped to $55 to $56 per barrel, falling below the Western price limit at $60. That's great. That's below the oil price cap, and it means that they're not going to be making much, if any, money on their exports, and that means that their budget predictions will fall. They will fall very short of their budget predictions. Against this background, India remains a main buyer of Russian oil. In 2025, it took around 80% of Urals, the seaborne exports. So, yeah, India seems to be a major sustainer of Russia's war. A bit of good news, says Tatarigami, after a sharp price increase driven by events in Iran and the potential threat of the Hormuz Strait blockade, crude oil prices have started to decline. I'm going to show you a bit of a video about oil pricing and why it hasn't spiked as much as people were expecting given what happened in Iran in my geopolitics video. Given the discounted rate at which Russia sells, the best scenario if the prices will stay around $60 per barrel. So that is that. Steve Rosenberg, the BBC journalist still in Moscow, says more on Russia's economic problems from today's Russian papers. One paper reports, quote, the problem of payment arrears is growing, surge in wage arrears. Another, shortage of skilled labour remains a key problem. They've been kind of dooming about the state of the economy quite openly in the Russian newspapers, and I think they're sort of gearing their readers and the population towards, priming them to make sure it's not a shock, because this will all be sanctioned, I would have thought, by the Kremlin. So you want to be priming your audience so that you normalize the idea of having a recession, and they're more likely to take it rather than it was just suddenly hoisted upon them. Andrew Perpetua says, infuriating how captured the idiot protesters are by propaganda. They're so brainwashed that they don't even know who they're being manipulated by and for what purpose. What's he talking about? Well, here we've got someone saying around 150 pro-Palestinian activists broke into the warehouses of a company in Tournai in Belgium and vandalized armored vehicles that were intended for Ukraine. As part of the Stop Arming Israel campaign, the 150 activists destroyed the company's offices with hammers before turning their rage on the armored vehicles inside the workshops. The targeted company specializes in the maintenance, repair and modernization of military vehicles. The damage is estimated at around €1 million. Since the Russian invasion, the company has already delivered about 260 armored vehicles to the Ukrainian army. Quote, a future delivery is now delayed by at least a month. That's the only thing these Hamas sympathizers have managed to achieve with their action, said the CEO. It's worth noting that someone does say that the company is called OIP and is 100% owned by Elbit. Elbit is an Israeli company. It's one of their main defense manufacturers, one of the main Israeli arms producers. So whatever they produce, it supports the Israeli genocide in Gaza, says this person. Moreover, the protest was announced beforehand and coordinated with the police. The main thing the activists did was painting graffiti. The company, of course, tries to paint themselves as kinds of terrorists, but literally nobody's buying that story. So I don't know. There are two sides to every story, right? But there are ideas that Russia would be provoking such activity. Remember, there's recently one in the UK at, was it Brize Norton, one of our RAF bases, where they broke onto a base and damaged some airplanes. Now, there was also Daily Telegraph infiltrated one of these Palestinian action groups, or I forget the name, I think it might be that, who some people are asking to be designated as a terrorist group, and that they are planning attacks on other RAF bases. And then you wonder, is there any fomenting of this kind of activity by the Russians, or is this, associating the military-industrial complex with Israel and just lumping it all together? I don't know. These are obviously issues, and when it hurts Ukraine, it hurts aspirations for freedom and democracy in the region. We need to support Ukraine militarily as much as possible, and that's a real shame if pro-Palestinian people have done something that damages Ukraine's chances. But we'll have to wait and see what the true details are there. Okay, 35,000 Ukrainian kids have now been removed from their parents' homes in various areas of Russian-occupied Ukraine and disappeared into Russia. So a new piece in The Guardian says, quote, basically impossible to get them back. Russia's mass abduction of Ukrainian children. It's an absolute shocker. And Russia are going to be wanting to do this for a number of reasons, not just to brainwash them, but they need children. The demographics of Russia are looking terrible, like they are in many countries in the world. and they want to try and overcome that by stealing children. Now, the White House, speaking of which, and those kind of war crimes, the White House plans to end funding for programs investigating war crimes in Ukraine, including efforts documenting Russian atrocities like torture and sexual violence, according to Reuters. Key initiatives may be shut down following a budget office recommendation. So this has already been on the cards. We talked about this previously, but actually it's quite wide-ranging, this. White House proposing to cut US funding for nearly 24 programs that investigate war crimes and accountability around the world. So not just Ukraine, but Myanmar, Syria, and obviously the Russian atrocities and crimes in Ukraine. This is an absolute shocker. Yeah. Right. So let's not be too depressed by that, and let's be warmed by this interaction here. So I shed a bit of a tear when I watched this before, so I hope I'm all right now. This man saved my life. So Ukrainian defender Alexei Anulia, who returned from Russian captivity at the end of 2022. So this is a guy that's already been released, in fact, several years ago, has been reunited with another warrior with whom he was in Russian captivity all that time ago. We're now 2025. So we're coming on to a further 3 years of captivity for this guy, and he's been released. And your Alexei Anulia comes to this not knowing that this other guy will be there, and then sees him. It's like, this man gave me his last bit of everything just so I could survive and hold on, he says. So I'm going to read this out. I'll play you it. I'll turn the sound off though eventually. He says, this is a person who saved my life. Is he your brother in arms? We were in a cell together. He's a witness to what they, the Russians, did to us there. This person saved my life. Did you come here today on purpose? I came here spontaneously, he replies. But he's the main character of my book. We were in captivity together. I gave many interviews about it, but no one believed what was really happening there until the very end. I gave the first open interview, but this man gave me his last bit of everything, just so I could survive and hold on. Then they put him in solitary confinement. He saw many of us being killed. I don't know how he endured. But many of the relatives didn't believe what I said about what happened to us. I fought for him until the very end. I asked anyone I could. And when did this happen? In 2022, he says. He was captured in Mariupol. We are from Chernihiv, but we ended up together in the Tula region. Obviously in Russia, in captivity there. Then he was thrown into solitary. Then I was, and some of us were tortured to death there. We congratulate you. We're glad he's here. We were in the same cell. This man truly has the spirit of a Marine. He is a treasure. And I guess, you know, there's nothing like the connections you make, I guess, at times of extreme duress like that, like being in prison. I remember reading Sean Pinner's book talking about Dmitry, I think. Was he Czech? Was he a Czech or Croatian? And then he's just been released recently, and Sean was really happy and surprised to hear of that. Yeah, incredible stories these people will tell, and these are the lucky ones, of course, surviving to live another day. Anyway, you know, huge respect to them for enduring what would you know, it's not even remotely on our radar in our daily lives as we do whatever we do. Hopefully thankful that we're not in a Russian prison getting electrocuted and tortured and whatnot. But yeah, really heartwarming to see those two being reunited. Thank you very much. Take care. Please remember to like, subscribe and share. If you haven't subscribed, I'm trying to get to 100,000. It will take me about another 4 years at this rate, at least. But it would be lovely to show my son one of those plats, because that's really all I want to get there for. There's no other reason. Honestly, isn't. So make Oscar happy. Please subscribe. Thanks so much. Take care. Speak to you soon.